your 1.5 part 3 is going to go over your quadratic equations again. So you're going to have to know that x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Remember your discriminant, that b squared minus 4 times a times c. We said that before, if you got an answer that was greater than 0, that you have 2 real solutions. If you got an answer that was equal to 0, it's 1 real solution. And if you got an answer less than 0, it was no real solutions. The reason why is because if you have a negative underneath that radical, it's going to now take into consideration what we did yesterday, become an I, which is an imaginary solution or an imaginary number. So we're going to have imaginary solutions with these. So it's no longer going to be no real solution. It's going to be your imaginary solutions. So if we look at example A, I'm going to do it underneath these. We have, wow, that's really thick. Here we go. Okay. So for A, we have x squared plus 9 is equal to 0. This is kind of similar as to what some of you may have seen on your last test. So this, you don't have an x, which means you don't have a b term. Your b term would be 0. So if you were to identify your a, your b, and your c from here, your a is going to be 1, b is 0, and c is 9. So this is going to give you, if you use your quadratic formula, x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9 all over 2 times 1. So this just means that this is going to simplify to give you x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 0 minus 36 all over 2. That 0 minus 36 is just negative 36. So x is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 36 all over 2. This simplifies because that negative underneath the square root becomes I. And then you're taking the square root of 36 all over 2. So then from here, you are going to have x is equal to plus or minus 6i over 2. This still simplifies since you have that 2 underneath the 6. So 2 goes into 6 3 times. So that's just plus or minus 3i. For example B, we have x squared plus 4x plus 5 is equal to 0. So for this one, our A is 1, B is 4, C is 5. So plug that into your quadratic formula. We're going to have the opposite of 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5 all over 2 times 1. So from here, this simplifies to give you x is equal to plus or minus, or sorry, negative 4. Negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 20 all over 2. That 16 minus 20 underneath the radical is negative 4. So that's negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 over 2. That negative underneath the radical has to become an I on the outside, so it becomes a positive 4 underneath there. The square root of 4 is 2. So that's x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 2i all over 2. The 2 in the denominator goes into both the negative 4 and the 2i evenly. So we're going to simplify that. The 2 on the bottom would become 1. The negative 4 on the top would become negative 2. And the 2i would become 1i, or just I. So that would give you a solution of negative 2 plus or minus I. If we get some other examples for number 1, here we have 10x squared minus 4x plus 10 is equal to 0. It tells us to solve each equation with the quadratic formula. So for this one, Our A is 10. I'm going to do it this way so that way I can make it. Our A is 10. B is -4. C is 10. So that means if we plug these into our quadratic formula, we're going to have x is equal to the opposite of -4 plus or minus the square root of -4 squared minus 4 times 10 times 10 all over 2 times 10. From here, we're going to simplify. Double negatives turn into positives, so that's x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 400 all over 20. That 16 minus 400 is going to give you a negative 384. From here, we're going to simplify that negative underneath. It's going to turn into an I. That 384, simplify it. So it is an even number, so you can divide it by 2. 2 goes into 3 one time with 1 left over. 2 goes into 18 9 times. 2 goes into 4 twice. You can divide that by 2 as well. So 2 goes into 19 9 times with 18, so that's 1 left over. 2 goes into 12 6 times. That 96, 6 goes into 9 one time with 3 left over. 6 goes into 36 6 times. That 16 is 4 and 4. That 6 is 2 and 3. We're working with square roots, so we're looking for sets of 2 that are the same. You have 2 2's here and 2 4's here. This 2 and this 3 are left over, so they're going to stay under. So that means you're going to have x is equal to 4 plus or minus 4 times 2 is 8i, square root 2 times 3 is 6, all over 20. Your 4, your 8i, and your 20 all share a common factor of 4. So you divide all of them by 4. The 4 turns into a 1, the 8i turns into 2i, and the 20 turns into 5. So this gives you x is equal to 1 plus or minus 2i square root 6, all over 5. For number 2, we have x squared minus 6x plus 12 is equal to 0. So for this one, your A is 1, B is -6, C is 12. So we're going to have x is equal to the opposite of -6 plus or minus the square root of -6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12 all over 2 times 1. So again, those double negatives are going to turn into positive with that 6. So we have 6 is being added and subtracted to the square root of -6 squared is 36. -4 times 1 is -4 times 12 is -48. And this is all over 2. Next, simplify the subtraction underneath the radical. So that's x is equal to 6 plus or minus the square root of -12 all over 2. That negative comes out as I. That 12 is 4 and 3. 4 is 2 and 2. Those 2's pair up. That 3 stays under. That gives you x is equal to 6 plus or minus 2i square root 3 all over 2. 6, 2i, and 2 are all divisible by 2. So your 2 becomes 1, your 2i just becomes I, and your 6 becomes 3 to give you 3 plus or minus I square root 3. For number 3, we're given 5x squared minus 2x plus 5 is equal to 0. Your A is 5, B is -2, C is 5. So this is going to give us x is equal to the opposite of -2 plus or minus the square root of -2 squared minus 4 times 5 times 5 all over 2 times 5. So this simplifies to give you 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 5 times 4 is 20 times 5 is 100 all over 10. Your 4 minus 100 is negative 96. So that's x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 96 all over 10. That negative becomes I in front. The 96 is divisible by 2. 2 goes into 9 4 times with 1 left over. 2 goes into 16 8 times. That 48 is 4 and 12. 12 is 4 and 3. So that means that your two 4s are going to pair up. The 3 and the 2 are going to stay under. So that's x is equal to 2 plus or minus 4i. Square root 2 times 3 is 6 all over 10. Your 2, your 4i, and your 10 are all divisible by 2. So that means that your 2 turns into 1, 4 turns into 2, 10 turns into 5, giving you x is equal to 1 plus or minus 2i square root 6 all over 5. For number 4, you have 4b squared minus 3b plus 2 is equal to 0. A is 4, b is negative 3, and c is 2. So this is going to give us x is equal to the opposite of negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 all over 2 times 4. Bless you. So that means that you're going to have 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus the 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 4 is 32. All over 8. From here, the 9 minus 32 is what you'll do. You're going to get x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of a negative 23 all over 8. The only thing that you can do from here is simplify that negative underneath the radical because 23 is a prime number. So this gives you 3 plus or minus I square root 23 over 8. Oh my gosh. 23 over 8. There we go. For our next question for 5, we have 7x squared plus 2x plus 8 is equal to 0. Your 7 is your A. Oops. B is 2. C is 8. So that's going to give us x is equal to the opposite of 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 7 times 8 all over 2 times 7. You're going to simplify this and get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus the 4 times 7 is 28. If we multiply that by 8, the 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times 2 is 16 plus 6 is 22. So it's minus 224 all over 14. From here, we have x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 220 all over 14. I comes out, turns it into a positive 220. 220 is 22 and 10. 10 is 2 and 5. 22 is 2 and 11. Your 2's pair up. Your 5 and 11 stay under. That gives you negative 2 plus or minus 2i square root 55 all over 14. Your 2i, and 14 are all divisible by 2. So this negative 2 turns into negative 1. 2i turns into I, or just 1i. The 14 turns into 7, giving you x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus I square root 55 over 7. For 6, you have 6p squared minus 8p plus 6 is equal to 0. So your A is 6, B is negative 8, and C is 6. So this is going to give us x is equal to the opposite of negative 8 plus or minus the square root of negative 8 squared minus 4 times 6 all over 2 times 6. Double negatives turn into positives, so x is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of negative 8 squared is 64. You have negative 4 times 6, which is negative 24, times 6. The 6 times 4 is 24. 6 times 2 plus 2 is 14. So it's negative 144 over 12. From here, you're going to do the 64 minus 144 underneath that radical. And that's going to leave you with 8 plus or minus the square root of a negative. Your 4 minus 4 is 0. 14 minus 6 is 8. So negative 80 over 12. Again, negative comes out, turns into I. 80 is 8 and 10. 10 is 2 and 5. 8 is 2 and 4. 4 is 2 and 2. 2 2's, another 2 2's. 5 stays under. So 2 times 2 gives you 4 square root 5. So that's x is equal to 8 plus or minus 4i square root 5 all over 12. 8, 4, and 12 are all divisible by 4. So the 12 turns into 3, 4 turns into 1, 8 turns into 2. So that gives you 2 plus or minus I square root 5 all over 3. For 7, we have 9x squared minus 4x plus 2 is equal to 0. So A is 9, B is negative 4, C is 2. This is going to give us x is equal to the opposite of negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 9 times 2 all over 2 times 9. So this simplifies to give us 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus the 36 times 2 is 72 all over 18. Underneath that radical, you're going to have a negative. This turns into 12. This turns into 6. 56 over 18. Your negative comes out. Your 56 is 7 and 8. 8 is 4 and 2. 4 is 2 and 2. 2's pair up. 7 and 2 stay under. So that's x is equal to 4 plus or minus 2i square root 14 over 18. Simplify your 4, your 2i, and your 18. 4 turns into 2. 2i turns into I. 18 turns into 9. So that's 2 plus or minus I square root 14 all over 9. For 8, you have 12v squared minus 6v plus 10 is equal to 0. So again, A is 12, B is negative 6, C is 10. This is going to give us x is equal to the opposite of negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 12 times 10 all over 2 times 12. So if we simplify this, we have 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 480 all over 24. Your 36 minus 480 is what you'll do next. I'm just going to do this off to the side. That 0 turns into 10, making the 8 a 7. So that's 444. So x is equal to 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 444 all over 24. That 444 is 4 and 111. 4 is 2 and 2. That 111 is 3 and 37. Yeah, 3 and 37. Your 2's pair up. The 3 and the 37 don't have common other. We'll keep under the radical. So it'll give us x is equal to 6 plus or minus 2 square root 111 all over 24. So simplify that. You have 3, you have 1 with the I, because the I comes out, and 12. So it's going to give you x is equal to 3 plus or minus I square root 111 all over 12. For number 9, you have 5m squared minus 4m plus 6 is equal to 0. A is 5, B is negative 4, C is 6. So that's going to give us x is equal to the opposite of negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 5 times 6 all over 2 times 5. This is going to simplify to be 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus the 4 times 5 is 20 times 6 is 120 all over 10. From here you have 120 and 16 underneath that radical. So they subtract and they give you 4 plus or minus the square root of a negative 104 all over 10. From here that I comes out. 104 is divisible by 4. It goes in 26 times. 4 goes into 10 twice with 8, so that's 2 left over. 4 goes into 24 6 times. So that 26 is 2 and 13. The 4 is 2 and 2. So your 2 2's will pair up. 2 and 13 stay under. That's 4 plus or minus 2i square root 26 all over 10. 4 turns into 2, 2i turns into I, 10 turns into 5. That gives you 2 plus or minus I square root 26 all over 5. For 10, you have 6m squared plus 3m plus 2. Your 6 is A, B is 3, C is 2. So that's x is equal to the opposite of 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 6 times 2 all over 2 times 6. So this just simplifies to give you 3, or negative 3, sorry, plus or minus the square root of 9 minus the 6 times 4 is 24 times 2 is 48 all over 12. Simplifying even further, you have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of a negative 39 all over 12. The negative comes out. The 39 is just 3 and 13, so you can't simplify that. It's just giving you x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus I square root 39 all over 12. Now, yes, you can simplify the negative 3 and the 12, but there is nothing that came out of that square root of 39 that's divisible by both of those. So you have to leave it exactly what you have here.